When people imagine surviving an SHTF scenario, one common fantasy involves living off the land, foraging wild plants and berries like some modern-day hunter-gatherer. It is a romantic idea conjuring up images of pristine forests full of abundant food, waiting to be plucked and eaten. But here's the cold, hard truth. Foraging will not save you in a survival situation. In fact, it might do the opposite. It could get you killed. Let's start with the biggest misconception, that you can survive on foraged plants alone. Now, while wild edibles can supplement your diet, they're rarely enough to sustain you, especially when you're burning through calories just to stay alive. Most wild plants are incredibly low in calories. Just think about it for a second. How many dandelion leaves or cattail shoots would you have to eat to match the calories in a single loaf of bread? Spoiler alert, it's a lot. Foraging might work in tandem with hunting, fishing, or stored food, but as your only source of sustenance, you'd starve before long. Another dangerous myth is that if animals eat a plant, it must be safe for humans. This obviously couldn't be further from the truth. Animals have entirely different digestive systems and tolerance for toxins. Take poison ivy, for example. Deer can munch on it like it's a salad bar, but you wouldn't dream of touching it, let alone eating it. The same goes for berries and even mushrooms. Just because a bird eats a berry doesn't mean it's safe for you. So relying on what wildlife does as your guide can lead you to a world of hurt or worse. Speaking of berries, let's talk about another common misconception, that they're an easy, safe option. Yes, some berries like blackberries or wild blueberries are edible, but others like nightshade berries, which look a lot alike, are highly toxic. Mistaking a toxic berry for a safe one, this one's toxic by the way, is far too easy, especially if you're inexperienced or panic. And the same goes for mushrooms, which are a death trap for beginning foragers. Even seasoned mushroom hunters sometimes mistake a poisonous variety for an edible one. This one's poisonous, and the consequences can be lethal. Mushrooms are just best left alone unless you're absolutely certain about what you're doing. And even if you do know something about foraging, identifying plants is still super tricky. Many edible plants have toxic lookalikes, and distinguishing between them often needs careful observation. This is toxic. As an example, wild carrots look a lot like poison hemlock, a plant so toxic that just touching it can cause irritation. And this is poison hemlock, by the way. Misidentifying a plant in the wild can be the difference between literally life and death. And in a high-stress survival situation, when you're tired, hungry, and desperate, your judgment isn't at its sharpest. One of the most overlooked challenges of foraging is seasonality. Nature does not provide the same menu year-round. Spring, you might find tender greens and shoots, and summer might bring berries and fruits, but winter is a whole nother story. In colder months, foraged food becomes incredibly scarce, and you might be left digging through snow for roots or bark. Even in the best of times, foraging isn't a reliable or consistent food source. You can't count on it to provide what you need when you need it. And then there's the misconception that all foraged foods can be eaten like they are. Many wild plants need processing to make them edible or to remove toxins. Acorns, for example, are a fantastic survival food, but they're packed with tannins that can cause severe digestive issues if you eat them raw. You need to leach the tannins out by soaking the acorns in water, sometimes for days, before they're safe to eat. Pokeweed, which is another great wild edible, is toxic if it's not cooked properly, and even then it should only be eaten in small amounts. The thought that you can just pluck something and eat it without any preparation is a recipe for disaster. Medicinal plants also come with their own risks. Just because a plant is used for medicine doesn't mean it's harmless. Many medicinal plants, like the one pictured, are toxic in large doses or have side effects that can cause more harm than good. For instance, foxglove can regulate heart rhythms, but even a small misstep in dosage can be deadly. Inexperienced foragers might assume natural means safe, but that's a dangerous assumption to make. Another reality people overlook is the environmental impact of foraging. In a widespread disaster, you won't be the only one turning to the wild for food. If everyone around you starts foraging, local resources could be depleted really quickly. Overharvesting can devastate ecosystems, leaving behind nothing for regrowth. Sustainable foraging practices, like only taking a small portion and leaving enough for plants to reproduce, are crucial. But in an SHTF situation, desperation is going to lead to people stripping the land bare. Finally, a lot of people assume that they'll just look up plants online if they're unsure. But in a survival scenario, you might not have internet access or even a fully charged phone. Without a foraging guide or prior knowledge, you're left to guess, and guessing when it comes to wild plants is a gamble you do not want to take. If you're serious about foraging, you need to practice now while you're safe and you have the resources to learn from your mistakes. So the bottom line is this: foraging can be a valuable skill, and it is a valuable skill, but it's not the magic solution people think it is. It requires knowledge, practice, and preparation. Wild plants can provide some nutrition, but they can't meet all your needs. They can definitely supplement your survival strategy, but they can't replace your stored food, hunting, or gardening. And without proper training, foraging is as likely to harm you as it is to help you, like trying to eat this mushroom, which will kill you. So before you bet your life on foraging, take the time to learn. Practice identifying plants, invest in physical foraging guides, and understand the risks involved. Because when it comes to SHTF scenarios, believing that you'll just magically know which plants to eat might just be the mistake that costs you everything.